We begin at 5 following a double homicide across state lines. Caleb Fosnaugh from Coshocton County is accused of killing his ex-girlfriend Kateryna Tovmash and Matthew Wade, a U.S. soldier in North Carolina. Tonight we're hearing from those closest to Tovmash. We want to thank you for being with us, both on 10 TV and streaming on 10 TV Plus. I'm Stacia Nucken.
And I'm Jeff Hogan. The Moore County Sheriff's Office in North Carolina says Tovmash and Fosnaugh dated in Ohio. 10 TV's Carla Rogner spoke with a friend of Tovmash today and joins us in the newsroom with more on this story. Carla.
Valentine's Day is supposed to be about love. Flowers, chocolate, a text that says, "Thinking of you." But on the morning of February 14th, 2026, in a quiet neighborhood in Vass, North Carolina, somebody's Valentine's Day looked completely different. 2 people were found shot to death inside a home, and the man police believe pulled that trigger, he drove all the way from Ohio to do it. When the clock strikes midnight, the truth comes out. I'm 12 a.m. crime, and every single day I bring you real cases of domestic violence that turn deadly. The stories the system tried to bury, the victims who deserve justice. If you're about that raw, unfiltered truth, hit subscribe. New case drops every day at midnight. Don't sleep on justice. This is 12 a.m. crime. Her name was Kateryna Tovmash. Most people who loved her called her Katya. She was 21 years old, the oldest of 6 children, and she was raised in Ukraine as a devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She had a childhood best friend named Kirill. Same school, same church, same everything. And by all accounts, Katya was the kind of person who showed up for people, every time. Without fail. Katya did not come to America chasing a dream. She came here because staying in Ukraine meant she might die. When Russia invaded, her family made the only choice that made sense. They left. And Kirill said it plainly.
But she came here because of the war, to hide from death, from the danger. She came here with her family. And this is not normal.
She was not wrong. That is not normal. But that was Katya's reality. She ended up in Ohio first, and that is where she met Caleb Fosnaugh. He was 25, had lived in Coshocton County for about a decade, no violent history on record. They dated. And then at some point, it ended. Katya moved on, relocated to North Carolina, and was building her life. She was with someone new, a 28-year-old U.S. Army soldier named Matthew Wade, stationed at Fort Bragg. Like, what more do you need? She survived a war. She found stability. She had people who loved her. And then came Valentine's Day. Here is the thing about breakups. Most people go through them. Most people feel the sting of it. The ignored texts, the late nights, the trying to figure out where it all went wrong. And most people eventually find a way to keep going. They grieve it. They sit with it. And then they move on. Caleb Fosnaugh did not move on. Now we don't have the full story of what their relationship looked like. We don't know what the breakup looked like. We don't know if there were arguments, if there was tension, if Katya had told him to leave her alone. The sources don't give us all of that. But what we do know, what the evidence would later make very clear, is that somewhere in Caleb's mind, this was not over. Even after Katya relocated from Ohio to North Carolina, even after she built a new life, even after she was with someone else, in his head, apparently, something was still unresolved. And that is a dangerous place for a person to be living, because here is what we know for certain. At some point on or before Valentine's Day 2026, Caleb Fosnaugh made a decision. He got in his white 2018 Ford Mustang, and he drove from Coshocton County, Ohio, all the way down to Vass, North Carolina. That is roughly a 9-hour drive. 9 hours. Sitting behind that wheel, heading toward a woman who had already moved on, who was already with someone else, who was already building her future. He drove the whole way. So what, you might say? Maybe he just wanted to talk. Maybe he just needed closure. But here is where that argument falls apart completely. Because when Caleb Fosnor arrived at that home in Vass, North Carolina, he did not knock on the front door. He did not call. He did not wait outside and hope for a conversation. He broke in. The charge of breaking and entering is not a footnote in this case. It is the detail that tells you everything you need to know about what kind of visit this was. You do not break into someone's home because you want to talk. You do not travel 9 hours across state lines and force your way into a house because you are looking for closure. That was not a visit. That was a hunt. Inside that home, on the morning of February 14th, 2026, were two people who had no reason to expect any of this. Kateryna Tovmash, Katya, the 21-year-old Ukrainian refugee who came to this country to be safe, and Matthew Wade, 28 years old, a United States Army soldier, a man who spent his career in service of a country that was supposed to protect people like her. They were home on Valentine's Day, together, and Caleb Fosnor walked in on that. Let me tell you something. The details of what happened inside that home are not fully public. There is no minute-by-minute account in the sources we have. What we know is the result, and the result is devastating enough. At some point during the early morning hours of Valentine's Day, Caleb Fosnor broke into the residence in Vass, North Carolina. Once inside, he shot and killed both Kateryna Tovmash and Matthew Wade. Two people, shot dead, in a home that was supposed to be their safe space. Katya, a girl who crossed an ocean to escape violence, who had already lost one life back in Ukraine, just to start another one here, who had 5 younger siblings counting on her, who had a best friend who called her every time life got hard, shot and killed in her own home, on Valentine's Day, by the man she had already left behind, Matthew Wade, a soldier, a man who willingly put himself in harm's way for this country, killed not on a battlefield, not in the line of duty, but in his own home, on a holiday, by someone who had no right to be there. Both of them were gone before the morning was over. And Caleb Fosnor, he walked back out of that house, got back in his white Mustang, and drove. He pointed that car north, back toward Ohio, back toward Coshocton County, like he could just go home after this, like he could just return to his regular life, like none of it had happened. Deputies with the Moore County Sheriff's Office responded to the scene at around 7:45 that Valentine's Day morning. That is when the call came in. That is when someone reported a shooting at that residence. When they arrived, they found both victims inside the home, deceased. The crime scene was already cold, and the man they believed had done this was already hours away, somewhere on the highway between North Carolina and Ohio. The clock had started. Investigators moved fast. They identified Caleb Fosnor as their suspect. They knew he and Katya had a history. Our year that he was the ex-boyfriend, that the relationship had existed back in Ohio, and that he had no legitimate reason to be at that home. They also quickly determined, based on the timing and the direction of travel, that he was likely heading back to Coshocton County, 9 hours back up the road. If they were going to catch him, they had a narrow window. So Moore County did not try to handle this alone. They picked up the phone and called Ohio. The Coshocton County Sheriff's Office got the call from North Carolina, and they moved immediately. What they had to work with was simple: a suspect, a car, and a direction. Caleb Fosnor was somewhere on the road, driving north in a white 2018 Ford Mustang, almost certainly heading back to the county he had called home for the better part of a decade. So the investigators did the math. They worked backwards from the time of the crime, estimated when he likely left North Carolina, factored in the drive time, and started calculating where on that route he would be by the time Ohio had eyes on the road. That is not glamorous detective work. That is just focus. That is people who understood that every minute they wasted was a minute he got closer to walking through his front door. The Coshocton County Sheriff's Office coordinated with Ohio State Highway Patrol, troopers on the ground and resources in the sky, and they spread out along State Route 541, waiting, and they found him, right on schedule, driving into Coshocton County like he had somewhere normal to be. The traffic stop happened at the intersection of State Route 541 and County Road 120 in Linton Township at around 2:18 in the afternoon. That is roughly 6 hours after the bodies were discovered in North Carolina. 6 hours. He almost made it home. The arrest video was later shared publicly, and it shows deputies and troopers surrounding the vehicle, giving commands, and taking Caleb Fosnor into custody without incident. A lieutenant from the Coshocton County Sheriff's Office described the operation as seamless, every agency working together. No chaos, no drama. Just a clean, coordinated takedown on the side of an Ohio road. But hey, clean arrest or not, 2 people were still dead, and no amount of seamless cooperation was going to change that. Fosnor was booked into the Coshocton County Justice Center, and when the booking footage came out, seeing him walk through those doors, getting processed like it was routine, that image hit different, knowing what he had allegedly just done hours earlier, knowing that while he was being fingerprinted in Ohio, a family in North Carolina was just finding out that their daughter, their big sister, was gone.
Yeah, well, we know that authorities arrested Caleb Fosnor as he was on his way back to Ohio after they say he killed Tovmash and Wade inside a North Carolina home. Now, I talked to Tovmash's best friend today, who says she was a refugee from Ukraine who came to the U.S. to seek safety.
Childhood friends, our whole life, we were always together.
Kirill says he grew up with Kateryna in Ukraine as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
My whole life, if anytime I'm in trouble, she's there. Like, seriously, she would always come. She would always help. She would do everything to help me.
To him, 21-year-old Kateryna was like an older sister, though she had 5 younger siblings of her own.
She loved them so much. She always just took care of them.
He says they kept in touch as they fled war in Ukraine.
But she came here because of the war, to hide from death, from the danger. She came here with her family. And this is not normal.
According to investigators in North Carolina, Tovmash was shot and killed on Saturday alongside 28-year-old Matthew Wade, a soldier at Fort Bragg. The suspect was identified as Kateryna's ex-boyfriend, 25-year-old Caleb Fosnor. He was arrested Saturday afternoon as he drove back to Coshocton County. Now he's in jail, facing 2 murder charges and breaking and entering. Kirill says his friend did not deserve this.
I'm doing fine right now, just because I know I'm going to see her again. I know that for sure. And I know the best thing we can do in this situation, I know this, and her family knows this right now, especially her siblings, is do everything to help her.
Yeah, right now, Caleb Fosnor is in jail in Coshocton. We hope to learn more about this case, including when he'll be brought back to North Carolina when the courts reopen tomorrow. Reporting in the newsroom, Carla Rogner, 10 TV News.
Caleb Fosnor was charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of breaking and entering. He was held without bond. The very next morning, a Coshocton County judge signed an extradition order, clearing the way for North Carolina authorities to come pick him up and bring him back to face those charges in Moore County. Deputies in Moore County had a 30-day window to make that transfer happen. His criminal history up to this point was almost nothing. Traffic violations. That was it. No red flags on paper, no prior violence on record, which honestly makes this harder, not easier, to process, because it means nobody saw this coming from a legal standpoint. There was no file, no restraining order, no documented pattern that investigators could point to and say they had been watching him. The case, as it stood, was straightforward in terms of the charges. A man drove across state lines, broke into a home, and shot 2 people dead. The evidence, the timeline, and the arrest all lined up. The legal process was just beginning, but the facts on the ground were already damning. Kateryna Tovmash was 21 years old. Her family started a GoFundMe to bring her body to Utah for burial, and the response was immediate. Over $20,000 raised from people in Ukraine and across the United States, from strangers who never met her, but understood what her story meant. Her younger siblings, 5 of them, had already been through a war. They had already watched their family leave everything behind and start over in a foreign country. And now they had lost the big sister who held them together through all of it. The one who, according to everyone who knew her, gave her love to everybody she came across. The one who always showed up. Kirill, her childhood best friend. The one she grew up with in Ukraine. The one who ended up in Utah while she ended up in North Carolina, said it best. He said, "I'll just probably say that I love her. I think there's just something we always should say to people that we love, to people that are close. And sometimes we don't say that enough. And that right there is the part that stays with you, not the crime, not the charges, not the arrest video or the extradition order. It is that sentence, the reminder that the people we love are not always going to be there. And sometimes we hold back the words thinking there will be more time. Katya's story is proof that time is not guaranteed to anyone. Moving on, there is one more thing that needs to be said, because it would be wrong to end this story without saying it. Katya was not the only one. In the 7 months before she was killed, another Ukrainian refugee woman named Irina was stabbed to death on a light rail train in Charlotte, North Carolina. 2 women, both refugees, both from Ukraine, both murdered in the same state within less than a year of each other. Both of them came here running from a war, running from the very real possibility of dying on their own soil, and both of them were killed. Here instead, Kirill was preparing to return to Ukraine when all of this happened, and he said something that was hard to hear. He said he was worried that this was the second Ukrainian woman murdered in North Carolina in 7 months, that he did not feel good about that. And honestly, how could anyone? These were women who made it out, who survived the bombs and the displacement and the impossible grief of leaving home, who arrived in America with nothing but the hope that here, at least, they would be safe. And they were not safe. And that is a failure, not of a country, not of a single system, but of the very idea that survived means protected. Katya came here to survive. She deserved to. Matthew Wade served this country. He deserved to grow old. And somewhere in Coshocton County, Ohio, there is a white Ford Mustang that made a 9-hour drive it had no business making, and 2 families are left picking up the pieces of a Valentine's Day that nobody should ever have to remember the way they now have to remember it. I said what I said. This has been 12 a.m. crime. If this story moved you, share it, because the least we can do for Katya and Matthew is make sure people know their names.